What an amazing opportunity to have the Alexander Hamilton of 2025 with us. Thank you. Speaking of America 250.
I always point out there have been 79 Treasury Secretaries, but 47 presidents. So.
Oops, we're not going to go there. Well, this is an exciting opportunity, and no matter where you come from, where you stand, to have the Secretary of the Treasury, the President of the United States, endorsing the opportunity for money to follow kids and to put it in the right place is just extraordinary, so thank you. So, Jeff, I want to start with you. Jeff Yass, I know by the way, we're between you and award, the big award, the $1 million Yass Prize, but you're just going to be patient, because we have an important conversation to have. So Jeff, help us frame this moment. Like, we're talking about returning power to states. We're talking about accounts that go in the pockets of people. We're talking about flexibility with our tax dollars. What does that mean? Not just like in general for ECCA, but just talk about how money should flow in general.
Thank you, Jeannie. The Treasury Secretary mentioned that Trump accounts in the ECCA, and he talked about financial illiteracy in America. I grew up in the Bronx. I moved to Queens, and I was thrilled when a financial genius like Mamdani became the mayor of New York City, because he put his finger on the problem that there's scarcity. This is something we didn't realize before. There's an affordability crisis. But in New York City, they spend $40 billion a year on education. There are 900,000 kids in New York City. Now, there's very few people who can divide 40 billion by 900,000, but I asked some mathematicians at MIT how much that is, and it's $44,000 per kid. $44,000 per kid is how insane the system has gotten in New York City. The best Catholic schools in New York City cost less than $20,000. So we could reduce the amount of spending in New York City by $20 billion and get much, much better results. That would go a long way towards stopping the affordability crisis. And to me, you only need that one statistic to show how bizarre and inefficient and utterly insane the teachers union and the education bureaucracy is. If the ECCA, just $1,700 per taxpayer, could be as much as $50 to $100 billion a year if the IRS commissioner does his homework properly. If we knew who that was, it'd be great. And that money could flow. That money would be so much more efficiently spent than the $800, $900 billion that the government spends. It would change the world. It would give entrepreneurs like this room and the people who want to get into this room an opportunity to try out their business models, let the winners expand and let the losers die, and we will revolutionize education. Nothing in American history has ever approximated the size of the ECCA. It is a gigantic bill. It is a gigantic game changer. And while it's depressing when you hear the statistics, how people can't read and write, there is hope, and the cavalry is coming. And for that reason, I've never really been more optimistic.
I love the line, the cavalry's coming. And I do want to know why I'm offered, like, I don't know, it's been a long time, but like, do you want to put your tax refund to save the whales or something? I'm like, what is this? So why can't we have, right, do I want to put my tax refund to educational options for kids? I mean, it would be pretty game-changing. Let me stay with you for a minute before I turn to Anthony Brock. Jeff, you often talk about how money, like we all talk about money following kids, but you've introduced a pretty, I won't say radical, but to some people it's radical idea that the money should never start with schools or government. It should start with the parent. Talk about your idea.
Well, the idea is when the unions say we want to end public education, we don't want to end the funding of education. We just don't want the government to run it. We're in favor of food stamps in some circumstances, but I certainly don't want the government running the farms. We'd all starve to death. So if we're going to spend 25,000 per kid, just let the kid have the money and then let entrepreneurs handle the business. It's only in this one area where the government runs the entire thing. So no one's talking about defunding the schools at all. We're just talking about letting that money follow the child. And in Philadelphia, we spend $32,000 per kid, and there's about 5% of the kids that can read and write, for that 32,000. A mother of three, as Janine, I think, mentioned, living in Philadelphia, could go to the best Catholic school, the best charter school, the best private school for $16,000. Put the $16,000 in the kid's account. He's going to have $250,000 when he graduates. Basically, poverty ends. There's so much waste. There's so much fraud in this system that if we kept the amount of money we spend the same, but got rid of the waste and the fraud and just gave it in a private account to that kid, he would be graduating with $250,000. He wouldn't want to join a gang. He wouldn't be hopeless. He knows he has a future. He can go to college. He can buy a business. He can buy a house. He can do whatever the hell he pleases. And there would be hope and joy instead of poverty and despair.
Amazing. So Anthony Brock, now Dr. Anthony Brock, since Valiant Cross Academy of Montgomery, Alabama, won the $1 Million Yass Prize in 2023. That's who this is. You didn't realize we had like royalty up here. And Janine and I and our team visited you, and it was the most incredible juxtaposition. Here's Valiant Cross, and catty corner up the street is the church that you took us to, the Martin Luther King. Started Selma. Up the street, you could see the Capitol, and Governor Kay Ivey came that night to us. Down the street is where Rosa Parks got on the bus. Since you won the Yass Prize, you not only expanded Valiant Cross Academy for boys, these guys in uniform who recite the most incredible things every day, but you started a girls' school, you've expanded down to elementary. You're moving up the ladder, so I'm bragging on you. But you're ground zero for this conversation, right? Everything Jeff's saying, everything the secretary said. How does the federal policy? We always, most of us forget about you guys all the time because we're busy and we're in our zone. How does this all affect you?
Where do I start? First of all, I want to say thank you because winning the Yass Prize changed my life. And it's amazing to think that as I sit here, I get chills because there's somebody in the crowd tonight that's going to live this same experience that I've been blessed to live. But, when you talk about ground zero, I think about the closest story I want to tell is when my wife and I, and we're the only two that know, we were boarding the plane the other day, and we get a call that my mother has been rushed to the hospital. And so keep her in your prayers. But when I thought about my mother and my father who died back in 2022, public school educator, my mom's a teacher, and I think about how I'm a generation removed from living in poverty because my father grew up at a rough time, he lost both of his parents. They went and got educated, and it changed the trajectory of their life. Fast forward to today, in 2025, Valiant Cross started with 30 young men. Now we have over 300. We're about to open up a 4th campus in a few weeks. And so if we didn't have this opportunity to get on ground zero, a lot of people come to our school and they're always commenting about these young men and how awesome they are and how are they so well disciplined. Well, it's because we don't look at discipline as discipline problems. We look at it as an opportunity, like to find out what this young man is having a problem with. And I heard about the American dream, and so often my purpose in life, God purposed my brother and I to save as many black boys specifically as possible because they have so much genius inside of them that's unlocked. And so when you talk about putting money back into the hands of those who can provide, my calling on my life is to work with black boys because they are geniuses. Like we built Washington, D.C., if you want to think about it, and if we don't have education providers, we need more education providers. We need more policymakers to put the money back into the hands of the people who can make the decisions and who can impact change.
So let me just stay with you for a second. When people say, though, that your parents can't really make those choices and that if we give them the money that Jeff's talking about, like we're just going to give you $25,000 and they can decide, they're not going to know how to spend it. What do you say?
I say, what about Mrs. Scott? So we have a documentary that's on PBS called Fruit. We're working on our second documentary now. Mrs. Scott passed during the shooting of the documentary. She has 3 boys, 3 grandboys that she's taking care of. When she passed, we found out that she willed all of her money to Valiant Cross because she wanted more young men to have this opportunity. It was only $7,000. However, it's the thought that you can't say they don't know what to do with their money. She wants the little that she has to impact more generations of young people.
She's the widow at the well.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Amazing. So Secretary Bessent, we heard about the incredible commitment you and the President have made to education freedom. ECCA, huge battle, crazy for $1,700 a person. All right, well, we won't get started there. But when you think about returning power to the states, and you hear Anthony's story, you hear what Jeff has to say, help us communicate. What do we want to say about why the federal education bill, department, money is not the be-all and end-all? Why is this the solution that you're preaching?
Well, again, it's part of President Trump's message. You know, as he's speaking, he constantly talks about common sense. And this is just common sense, to let people control their own destiny, their children's destiny, and their choice. And as many of you may have heard, whenever you see Secretary Linda McMahon says, President Trump, you put me in charge of putting myself out of a job, because this administration believes that choice should be returned to the states, to the municipalities, and to the parents. And I think this is a very unique moment where post-COVID, when I think for the first time, many parents, especially fathers for the first time, saw the low quality of education that their children were getting, and became very interested in a change. And I think, you know, we are seeing, as I discussed, with many of these, the drop in these post-COVID test scores, with the radicalization of education, especially in places like California, where math became racist. Well, math became racist, and then you see that a huge number of the students at UC San Diego, they can't do middle school level math. And to be able to, you know, with these accounts, be able to fund the next generation. And really, you know, when you think about venture capital, and many people in here, you know, I would think of as venture capitalists, and then there's the next round in a venture capital stack, and which is accelerator capital. And I really think of the ECCA as the accelerator capital that's coming in from the government.
Do you really think that people are going to say, I want to give $1,700 to an organization I don't know? Like, what helps spark their interest?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. I think when we go back to the Trump accounts, I think that we are going to see, you know, we saw this incredible donation this week from Michael and Susan Dell. They're going to be giving $6.25 billion to 25 million American children they've never met. And it works out to $250 per child. And they just know that it is a critical moment, and that this is the right launch pad. So I believe that smaller taxpayers will be willing to do the same thing, because again, I think that we are at this moment where it's common sense. People want to assume control. They want to understand where their money is going, and they know that the results have failed. Like, I might not have agreed with Mike Pompeo on everything on foreign policy, but when he said the teachers' union and Randy Weingarten are one of the biggest, or perhaps the biggest enemy of America and the American way of life, I could not have agreed with him more. Could not have agreed with him more.
You know, I'm old enough to remember when Education Secretary Rod Page, under President Bush, said the teachers' unions are terrorists. And he got ripped one side up and down and the other because every time they opened their mouths, there was a challenge.
Yeah, well, and also, look, it's amazing how there's one group who pushes for failure. I believe that Mayor-elect Mondami went to Bronx Science, but now he wants to decertify the elite schools. Right? And I can tell you, if I don't know if we have any Bowdoin alumni in here, but having spent an hour with that young man, he's a young man with a bunch of old ideas that have never worked. And I can tell you, he is ill-educated. He wanted the photo made next to the portrait of Franklin Roosevelt, and President Trump, who I think most people in this room wouldn't know or expect, is an incredible student of history. And he started talking about President Roosevelt and Mondami, who had said that President Roosevelt was his hero. President Trump said, well, he was from this aristocratic family up on the Hudson River. And Mondami said, really? From up on the Hudson River? And who doesn't know? Like, Hyde Park is iconic in Roosevelt
Went in the pools because of polio.
Right, exactly.
Right?
I mean, it was just, but yeah, I think, again, there is a group, and I think that for people to have agency now and be able to exercise choice, I do believe Americans are the most generous people in the history of the world. And I think the opportunity to be able to direct gifts like this, whether it's the ECCA or to direct gifts to groups, because what we're going to have, what I didn't talk about, that with the Trump accounts, people are going to be able to adopt a school district, you're going to be able to adopt a state, you're going to be able to adopt a zip code. Susan and Michael made the decision that their 6.25 million would only go to zip codes that were 80% below the national income average or not. So there's going to be a lot of selectivity here. So I think this is going to be the 1-2 punch that is a game changer. We educate our children well, and then we give them a stake in the well-being of the U.S. Every child has a trust fund.
You know, it's interesting. Michael and Susan, Dell computers, which many of you have owned or still own, have never been political. This is not a political statement. Jeff, when you came into this stuff, it wasn't political, it wasn't partisan. I mean, I don't even think you ever, you were libertarian, which is not a party. Sorry, Steve Moore. But as you've gone through this work and talking about it, tell us about your experience in kind of marketing your concept of school choice. Do you think this is, why is it so divisive?
Because it's the most political thing in the world. There is 100% of the Democrats who are against it, and there's 5 or 10% of the Republicans who are against it, so it's always a close call. The teachers' union is the Democratic Party, so it would be nice if this was nonpartisan, but there isn't. I think, the secretary talked about Mamdani. Mamdani just didn't plop down from Mars. He was the work of decades of work, of effort by the teachers' union to indoctrinate children into a dislike of capitalism, mindlessness, so that he couldn't have won that election 20 years ago, as charming and as good a smile as he had. But over 20 years, where these kids, we weren't paying attention, and these kids were being indoctrinated into these socialist ideas, his lunacy makes sense to most college graduates. He won college graduates, a 60-40. That should frighten everybody. What is going on in these schools that a person like Mamdani is taken seriously? We have a problem. They got in there, they indoctrinated, and if they, the hero of the revolution, if you want to have a communist revolution, in my mind is Randi Weingarten. She fought hard to indoctrinate these kids for decades, and the fruit of her labor was Mamdani. So we have to stop it, and to accomplish anything, you got to get lucky. We got lucky in 4 ways. We had COVID, where people saw what's going on. We had the wokeness, which is insane, and we had the incredible spending that never stopped. But to hit the final parlay, we had to have Trump. If you had a president who was for school choice but wasn't willing to battle for it day in, day out, it wouldn't have happened. It was part of the big beautiful bill. It was not popular. He had to fight for it. So we got incredibly lucky. We hit a 14 parlay. I hope you're all on DraftKings betting your 14 parlays, and now we have an opportunity to make the greatest change in American history. And frankly, we got lucky. It would have been nice if Randy Weingarten stood up and said, you know what, I guess I'm a moron. This is ridiculous. You're right, I'll stop. She didn't, and she's not going to. But we won anyway, largely by luck, but I'll take it.
Amazing. So Anthony, bring us home. You are in Montgomery, Alabama. You are listening to this, and you've heard the secretary talk about financial literacy. You've heard Jeff talk about the allure of communism and socialism among young people. We know that young women under the age of 33 or something kind of put them over the top. A lot of my daughter's friends were those people. Thank God she doesn't think that way, because she wouldn't be coming to Christmas. True story. So what do you think? Like, when you hear this, what are you doing to educate your kids? Do you push back? Or are you like, yes, go? Like, how do your boys need to be up on the stage? What do they need to know? What do you take from here to bring them? And the girls that you're about to educate.
Okay, well, first of all, I tell my young men at my school, there is no room that you go in that there is anybody better than you. And I also say that there's no room you go in that you're better than anyone else. So I say stay hungry and stay humble at the same time. But yeah, so my young men, a lot of them deserve to be on this stage a lot more than I do, because they're just naturally brilliant, they're naturally creative. And I would say, in closing, because I know we're out of time, I would want to say to all the providers, we need more schools that are really good schools, and that's why I appreciate this collective that we have today. But I will also say that whenever God gives you a vision, I don't know how it's going to come. It may be through winning the Yass Prize, ESAs, or whatever. Whenever he gives you a vision, he always, 100% of the time, sends provision. And that's always the encouragement that I like to give all the providers out here.
Great way to end. Jeff Yass, thank you so much for all you do and for being on this panel. Don't go far. Anthony Brock and Secretary Bessent, thank you. We're so grateful. Please join me in thanking him. Amazing.